several steps ahead of the terrorists. We must anticipate and neutralize their evolving ability to carry out terrorist plots well before they're ever conceived and executed. Today, we'll also hear from 3 agencies that play a critical role in securing radiological materials in the U.S. and preventing dirty bomb attacks from occurring. And with that, we're going to turn to our panel. And I'm going to make some brief introductions of each of you, and then we'll invite you to present your testimony, and I will ask some questions, and some of my colleagues will drift in and out. They'll ask questions as well, and then by the time it'll be time for dinner, hopefully we'll be done sooner than that. But I want to welcome each of you for joining us today. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your preparation for this hearing and for your willingness to respond to our questions. The Honorable Ann Harrington is the Deputy Administrator for Defense Nuclear Non-Proliferation for the National Nuclear Security Administration. Does that fit on a business card? Barely. That's a lot. A position you've held, I understand, since what, 2010? 2010. Thank you. Prior to National Nuclear Security Administration, she served as the Director of the National Academy of Sciences Committee on International Security and Arms Control. She has also held positions in State Department as Acting Director and Deputy Director of the Office of Proliferation Threat Reduction. Welcome. Next on our panel we have Dr. Hubin. And I'm going to ask you to pronounce your last name. Let me try it, and then I want you to pronounce it for us. Gawadia. Is that right? Gawadia. The Director, Gawadia. That's a great name. The Director of the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office at the Department of Homeland Security. Dr. Gawadia was appointed Director in September of 2013 after being Acting Director since 2012. Dr. Gawadia, welcome. I understand you served in multiple positions at the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office since 2005, and prior to that, worked at the Department of Homeland Security's Science and Technology Directorate, the Transportation Security Administration, and the Federal Aviation Administration. Our next witness on this panel is Mr. Mark Sartorius, Executive Director for Operations at the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. In that role, he serves as the Chief Operating Officer overseeing the day-to-day operations of that agency. Mr. Sartorius joined the NRC 25 years ago as an operating license examiner, and then as a reactor inspector and senior project engineer. Mr. Sartorius, a U.S. Naval Academy graduate, served as the officer of the U.S. Navy's nuclear power program and as a nuclear trained submarine officer. Thank you for that service, too. Final witness this morning is Mr. David Trimble, who serves as a Director of the Natural Resources and Environmental Group at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Mr. Trimble is the primary author of a GAO report underlining the threat presented by the security of domestic industrial radiological sources. In his current role at GAO, Mr. Trimble provides leadership and oversight on nuclear security and cleanup issues. Previously, he has focused on environmental causes, including controlling toxic substances, clean water, clean air issues, and EPA management. Before joining GAO in 2009, Mr. Trimble served at the Department of State's Political Military Affairs Bureau, where he was responsible for export compliance and enforcement issues. So those are the introductions. I'm sure they don't do justice to each other, but we're delighted that you're here and that you're willing to help better inform this committee and hopefully the Senate with the potential threats that face us and what we might do about them. Ms. Harrington, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify on the Department of Energy National Nuclear Security Administration efforts to enhance the security of vulnerable, high-risk radioactive sources in the United States. I would like to thank you for your continued interest and the interest of the committee and its leadership on this important issue. I would also like to thank my colleagues from the Department of Homeland Security and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for being constructive and indispensable partners in the effort to reduce the risk of radiological incidents. The Office of Defense Nuclear Nonproliferation, which I lead, in conjunction with our federal, local, and industry partners, works to enhance the security of civilian radioactive materials in the United States and internationally. I have provided details on our programs in my written testimony. We do appreciate the comments and recommendations from the General Accountability Office, and we are actively implementing their recommendations to expand outreach to increase the number of program volunteers and enhance coordination with other federal agencies. I want to use the time allotted for my oral remarks to look at the path forward and at the strategic approach we are developing to address the challenges of securing the materials that can be used in a dirty bomb. The importance of securing high-risk radiological sources was highlighted at the 2014 Nuclear Security Summit, when the United States and 22 other countries signed on to a so-called gift basket, committing to secure all International Atomic Energy Agency classified Category 1 radioactive materials at a level that meets, or where possible exceeds, the guidelines of the agency's Code of Conduct on the Safety and Security of Radioactive Sources. The goal is to accomplish this by the 2016 Nuclear Security Summit. The recent theft in Mexico of a truck carrying a large Cobalt-60 source demonstrates how much our own security depends on the quality of security outside our borders. Commitments like the ones implemented under the Nuclear Security Summit process contribute in a meaningful way not just to the security of individual countries, but to our joint security. While we continue to proceed with implementation of security enhancements for high-risk radioactive materials, several factors have led us to consider a new strategic approach to addressing the dirty bomb threat through actions that achieve more permanent and sustainable threat reduction. Factors that we considered include the large number of radioactive sources worldwide, the fact that we secure or retire existing sources even as new sources and new devices are being introduced, the long-term cost for sustaining security systems, the limited options for disposal of these sources, and the general constraints within the federal budgets. The grand challenge we should consider is how we can achieve permanent risk reduction rather than continuing in the current preventive posture. Just as we have demonstrated that highly enriched uranium, or HEU, is not necessary for producing critical medical isotopes, and that we can eliminate HEU from that technology cycle, can we apply the same principle to radiological sources? We should strive to not only further enhance security, but reduce the size and complexity of the overall problem and achieve permanent threat reduction by decreasing the number of sites and devices that require the high-activity radioactive materials. The centerpiece of this strategy is to engage in a worldwide effort to provide reliable, non-radioactive alternatives to the highest activity radioactive sources that pose the greatest risk, or to find ways to reduce the amounts of material needed for a given function. We will need to have the engagement and active participation from the research, industry, and medical communities, but the potential benefits, removing the risk of a dirty bomb altogether, are significant. Considering a range of incentives for replacement where commercially viable alternatives exist is something that we are investigating, and we are also collaborating with our Research and Development Office to explore and assess technical improvements that could be developed and transferred to industry for commercialization. We recognize, however, that we may not succeed in replacing the need for all sources. For example, radioactive industrial sources such as mobile well logging and radiography sources may not have an acceptable and viable alternative. In such cases, we are collaborating with industry partners to develop innovative and sustainable security solutions. We have seen that other countries are willing to go above and beyond international norms and standards for radiological security through collaboration with our programs and through commitments they have made at the Nuclear Security Summit. We have also now seen domestically that some agreement states have taken radiological security to a higher level. While we have an important role to play in this regard, we also encourage all other states to show the same initiative to demonstrate leadership, and commit resources to take radiological security beyond minimum requirements. Thank you for your attention, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Harrington, thank you so much. Thanks for your testimony. Thanks for your service. Dr. Gawadia, would you please present your testimony at this time? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Chairman Copper, and I would extend Nan's thanks also for holding this hearing. It is a good opportunity for us to appear today to present to you and discuss with you the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office's efforts to prevent and prepare for radiological events. I am honored to be here today to testify with my distinguished colleagues. Their support and assistance are fundamental to the mission you have given my office. At the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office, we are singularly focused on the nuclear threat and seek to make nuclear terrorism a prohibitively difficult undertaking for our adversaries. In coordination with federal, state, and local partners, we develop and enhance the global nuclear detection architecture, which is a framework for detecting, analyzing, and reporting on nuclear and other radioactive materials that are out of regulatory control. Although my office focuses on detecting and locating radioactive materials once they are lost or stolen, we work very closely with our colleagues at the Department of Energy and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, who are responsible for the safety and security of these materials. Our approach to detection is based on the critical triad of intelligence, law enforcement, and technology. By ensuring intelligence-informed operations are conducted by well-trained operators using the right technologies, we maximize our ability to detect and interdict radiological and nuclear threats. The first leg of the triad, intelligence and information sharing, is very frankly the backbone of a robust detection architecture. Timely and accurate indicators and warnings are crucial to the deployment of resources and operations. Additionally, we analyze past nuclear smuggling cases and pertinent terrorism events and bring this knowledge to bear on the development of future detection architectures and systems. The Domestic Nuclear Detection Office's Joint Analysis Center enables information sharing and also provides alarm adjudication support and situational awareness to our stakeholders. To increase the awareness of lost and stolen sources, we regularly publish information bulletins for our state and local partners, summarizing relevant news articles with useful facts about radioactive materials. The second leg of our triad is law enforcement officers and first responders, those on the front lines of detection and prevention efforts. The Domestic Nuclear Detection Office works to ensure that they have the necessary capabilities and are well-trained and ready for the mission. Since 2005, through many collaborative efforts, we have provided radiation detection training to over 27,000 federal, state, and local law enforcement personnel and emergency responders. Annually, we conduct approximately 15 exercises that stress operator abilities to detect illicit radiological and nuclear material while enhancing collaboration and building trusted networks. To date, the Domestic Nuclear Detection Office has engaged with 29 states to raise awareness of this threat, and we assist our state and local partners as they develop their own detection programs. We work with them to build a flexible, multi-layered architecture that can be integrated into federal assets into a unified response in the event of a credible threat. By the end of 2015, we will have expanded these efforts to cover all 50 states. The NDO further supports law enforcement operations by providing mobile detection deployment units. These are designed to supplement existing local detection and reporting capabilities, especially in support of national security and national and other special security events. The program was instituted in 2008, and the trailers house equipment for up to 40 personnel. In fact, this year on July 4th, we will complete our 150th deployment of the mobile detection units. The final leg of our triad is technology. In addition to acquiring and deploying radiation sensors for the Department of Homeland Security's operational components, we maintain an aggressive transformational and applied research portfolio. The Domestic Nuclear Detection Office collaborates with federal research and development partners, as well as with industry, academia, and the national laboratories to bring the right technologies to frontline operators. Operators are always included in all of our efforts. For instance, we recently led the development of a next-generation handheld radioisotope identification device. These are regularly used by law enforcement and technical experts in the field. We work closely with our operational partners to identify key requirements for the design of the system. The final product is now a device that is lightweight, easy to use, more reliable, and even has lower life cycle costs. With your support, we will continue such collaborative efforts to develop breakthrough technologies and offer significant operational improvements and enhance our national detection capabilities. Thank you again for this opportunity to discuss DNDO's efforts to protect our nation from radiological and nuclear threats. I sincerely appreciate your interest and support for the entire nuclear security enterprise. Your leadership and our collaborations will help us ensure a safe, secure, and resilient homeland. Thank you.
Dr. Guardia, thank you so much. Mark Sartorius, please proceed. When you left the Navy, how many years did you serve?
5 years of active duty, sir, and then 18 years of reserve service.
Okay. And so 18 years of reserve service, so that was like 23 years.
Yes, sir.
That's how many years I served. 5 active, 18 reserve. And I was a Navy P-3 aircraft mission commander. And our job was to track Soviet nuclear subs. We did a lot of low-level missions off the coast of Vietnam, surface surveillance during the Vietnam War, including around those islands, Brantley Island and the South China Seas, where there's a big...
Yes, sir, and you oftentimes spent time looking for U.S. submarines without as much success.
No, we didn't look. We were not stupid enough to try to look. We knew we couldn't find them because they were so quiet. And the way we found them, as you know, was through sound. But we're very proud of your service there. And where you retired captain, are you?
Yes, I'm a retired captain.
So am I. Well, captain, my son Ben calls me Captain, my captains. And I always say, as you were, sailor. So, Captain, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Carper. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today on behalf of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or NRC. Radiological source security has been and continues to be a top priority in the NRC. The NRC continues to work with the 37 agreement states and domestic and international organizations on a variety of initiatives to make risk-significant radioactive sources even more secure and less vulnerable. The events of September 11, 2001 changed the threat environment and resulted in significant strengthening of the security of radioactive sources. Immediately following 9/11, the NRC, working with other federal and state agencies, prioritized actions to enhance the security of radioactive sources. These initial actions resulted in the NRC issuing a number of security advisories to NRC and agreement state licensees to communicate general threat information and recommend specific actions to enhance security and address potential threats. Once NRC identified actions that licensees needed to take to enhance the security and control of risk-significant sources, the agency issued orders that imposed legally binding requirements on our licensees. In addition, as mandated by the Energy Policy Act of 2005, the NRC convened an interagency task force on radiation source protection and security to evaluate and provide recommendations to the President and the Congress relating to the security of radiation sources in the United States from potential terrorist threats. This task force submitted its first report to the President and Congress in August of 2006, concluding that there were no significant gaps in the areas of radioactive source protection and security. The second task force report was provided in August of 2010, and the third report will be submitted this August. At a hearing held July the 12th, 2007, by the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations of this committee, a web-based licensing verification system was discussed. In an effort to better track transactions of radioactive material nationally, the NRC developed a portfolio of automated tools to verify licenses and track credentials, inspections, devices and sources, and events. This portfolio includes the National Source Tracking System, the web-based licensing system, and the license verification system. The NRC also ceased relying on the presumption that applicants for a license were acting in good faith, and instead instituted a policy by which the NRC and the agreement states would verify the legitimacy of applicants when first dealing with them. We also issued pre-licensing guidance that includes various applicant and licensee screening activities and site visits to ensure radioactive sources will be used as intended. The NRC also has implemented a process called the Integrated Materials Performance Evaluation Program, or IMPEP, to assess its own regional materials programs as well as those of the agreement states. The program provides the NRC with a systematic, integrated, and reliable evaluation of the strengths and weaknesses of the respective programs, and it provides an indication of areas in which the NRC and agreement states should dedicate more resources or management attention. Through a significant collaborative effort between the NRC and the agreement states, the agency developed a radioactive source security rulemaking to replace the earlier orders and provide requirements to a broad set of licensees. This rulemaking was informed by insights gained through the implementation of the orders. The resulting Rule 10 CFR Part 37 is an optimized mix of performance-based and prescriptive requirements that provide the framework for a licensee to develop a security program for risk-significant materials with measures specifically tailored to its facility. Compliance with the rule was required for NRC licensees by March 19, 2014. Agreement states licensees need to fulfill compatible requirements by March 2016. The NRC's efforts in material security have not ended with the publication and implementation of our radioactive source security rule. The NRC will continue to assess its programs to ensure that they promote the secure use and management of radioactive sources. This concludes my remarks, Senator, and I'll be happy to respond to any questions you may have.
Captain, thanks so much. David Trumbull, GAO. Nice to see David. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for all you guys do at GAO. Help our country, you know.
My testimony today discusses the challenges federal agencies face in securing industrial radiological sources in the United States and the steps agencies are taking to improve security. The potential vulnerability of radiological sources was highlighted last December when a truck in Mexico carrying a Cobalt-60 source, a high-risk radiological source, was stolen. In a report being issued today, we examined two types of industrial radiological sources, mobile and stationary. We found that both pose security challenges, even when licensees follow NRC security controls. The size and portability of mobile sources makes them particularly challenging. IAEA officials have stated that the transportation of high-risk sources is the most vulnerable part of the nuclear and radiological supply chain. NRC requirements to ensure security for these mobile sources provide a general framework that is to be implemented by the licensee. While NRC orders call on licensees to secure these sources, they do not explain how to do this by, for example, specifying the robustness of locks that must be used, or even that alarms be installed on trucks carrying mobile sources. While all 15 industrial radiography companies we visited met NRC's security requirements, we found great variation in the security measures employed, with some companies using only the most basic of locks to secure these high-risk sources. The risk to these mobile sources is underscored by 4 incidents of theft, all after NRC instituted increased controls for high-risk sources in 2005. In addition to these thefts, we identified 2 instances where unauthorized individuals, both claiming to be state inspectors, approached the crew while in the field. In one case, the individual was wearing a jacket with the logo of the state. This person gained access to the truck, sought detailed information about the source, and left with 2 accomplices only after the crew made calls to confirm his identity. Regarding stationary sources, these typically involve aerospace manufacturing plants, storage warehouses, and panoramic irradiators used to sterilize food. While all of the 33 facilities we visited met NRC's general security requirements, some facilities still appeared to have vulnerabilities. 9 facilities had unsecured skylights, 1 facility had an exterior roll-top door that was open and unattended, and the wall of the cage inside where the radiography cameras were stored did not go to the ceiling. Another facility had an irradiator on wheels near a loading dock that was secured with a simple padlock. In addition to these potential security vulnerabilities, we found that some facilities that separately secure their high-risk sources, such as well logging companies, did not have to comply with NRC's increased security requirements. Licensees of both mobile and stationary sources also face challenges in determining which employees are suitable for trustworthiness and reliability certification, which is required by NRC before an employee is given unescorted access to high-risk radiological sources. The TNR certification is intended to mitigate the risk of an insider threat, which NNSA has stated is the primary threat to facilities with high-risk radiological sources. Under NRC's security controls, it is left to the licensee to decide whether to grant employees unescorted access, even in cases where an individual has been convicted of a violent crime or making terroristic threats. About half of the 33 licensees we visited said they faced challenges in making these determinations, and 7 stated they had granted a TNR certification to individuals with criminal convictions, giving them unescorted access to high-risk sources. In one example, the individual had been arrested and convicted multiple times of assault, forgery, failure to appear in court, driving while intoxicated, driving with a suspended license, and twice for terroristic threats. Notably, the 2 convictions for terroristic threats were not included in the background information provided by NRC to the licensee. According to NRC, this person was not convicted of threats against the United States, but of making violent verbal threats against 2 individuals. Our report also examined the steps federal agencies are taking to better secure industrial radiological sources. NNSA has a program to install enhanced security measures at facilities containing high-risk sources, and both NNSA and DHS have research projects to help track mobile sources if lost or stolen. In addition, at the time of our review, NRC was preparing a security best practices guide for licensees. Our report includes recommendations to NRC to review and consider revising the TNR process and re-examine the regulatory gap that exempts some facilities from the increased security requirements. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
David, thank you so much. I think we have a couple of photos here that have been enlarged, and I'm going to ask, if I could, Mr. Trimble, for you to respond to a couple of questions. And I think your report included a number of visuals that were especially interesting. We have taken, I think, 3 of those photos and put them on these large charts. And I'm going to just present each of these 3 to you in sequence. And I just want to ask you to describe the photo and the security concern that it represents. And here's the first photo. What is the photo of?
Yeah, this is one of the sites we visited. This is a warehouse storing radiography cameras. And the potential security vulnerability we identified in this is the large door is obviously left open and unattended.
All right. And what is inside that might be of interest to us?
Yes, these are the radiography cameras that you had the earlier picture of. And so a warehouse would be sort of the central location where these cameras would be stored when they're not out in the field being used.
How would you be inside? Could it be 2 or 3 or maybe a couple dozen?
Yes, there could be any number of cameras located inside. And they would be, in this case, they would be in a storage room and behind a locked container. And so because they were in a locked container, they're meeting the NRC's security requirements, notwithstanding the open door and the unattended nature of that door.
Okay. Any idea how many of those handheld devices would be required if someone knew how to handle radioactive materials to actually create a weapon of real concern?
I think I would defer to the colleagues at the table here, but I believe 1 would be sufficient.
Okay. Let's look at the next photo. Please. And what do we have here?
So this is inside one of the storage warehouses for those radiography cameras. But as you can see here, while there's a cage lock on the door and the wall next to it don't go all the way to the ceiling, so it's that rather imperfect barrier. Now again, the inside of there, the cameras were in a locked container, and that is how. So notwithstanding the vulnerability there, they're still able to meet the requirements of the NRC guidelines.
Janet Napolitano used to be the Secretary of Homeland Security, as you'll recall. And I remember sitting here at this table talking to us about border security. And we were talking about building along the Mexican border with the U.S. Fences and walls. I remember she said something effective. I build a 20-foot fence, somebody will come along with a 25-foot ladder. Okay, it just reminds me of that. I think we have maybe one more photo that has been enlarged and placed on a chart. Let's look at that. Maybe you can tell us about that photo. And what do we have here?
So this is a picture of a skylight, and at 9 locations we visited, we had unsecured, we identified unsecured skylights at the facility. These facilities range from warehouse storing radiography cameras to scientific research facilities to large panoramic irradiators. So there are quite a range of facilities that have these vulnerabilities. Notably, I believe in the NNSA program, where they go in on a voluntary basis and beef up security, skylights is one of the areas which they would target in terms of either closing the means of ingress or securing the skylight.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell us whether in the building where the skylight exists, were the devices that we're talking about here, were they locked up in a secure facility?
Yes, so they're still meeting the NRC requirements because they would still be in a locked container inside the facility. But the skylight, from our view, is a potential vulnerability because it provides another way of getting inside the building to gain access to that container.
Yeah. As we all know, there are locked containers, and there are locked containers. And some are not very secure, others are quite secure. Can you comment on that, please?
Well, we saw that, I think, most pointedly with looking at the trucks the radiographers travel in with their mobile sources. Some of these trucks were secured with very simple padlocks. Some had high security locks, and inside the dark rooms where these cameras would be stored, sometimes people would just have a sort of an Army surplus container with a cable securing it to the truck, which provided the second lock required under the requirements. Some took the mission much more seriously, bought sort of reinforced steel containers and had bolted it down and done much more of a job to secure those containers. So it's a great variability is what we observed in the field.
We just ask other panelists just to react to what we've seen and what Mr. Trimble has said. Any thoughts before I ask a different question? No? Captain Sartorius?
Senator, I would just say that this is the first I've seen of these pictures. I have been made aware of issues that the GAO has found within their report. Being an organization that always strives to continually improve, we have a new security rule, which I mentioned, 10 CFR Part 37. We will look at that rule and see if there are things that we need to beef up. But we, as a regulatory body, we put regulations in place that are risk-informed and performance-based, and we do not typically have a one rule fits all. That we leave it to the licensees to. It's their responsibility to take our requirements and put their program into place and ensure that they're complying with our regulations. Now, we do provide with rules guidance that will instruct licensees on how they can construct and operate their program in a manner that will comply with our regulatory requirements. But we leave it to the licensee to put their program in place to document a written security plan. I'd have to understand the security zone on some of these pictures to understand completely all the details. But I wanted to provide that short perspective.
Okay, good. Is this an honor system that's in place? Is basically self-policing compliance?
No, because we also inspect these facilities, and where we have compliance problems, where they do not comply with our regulatory requirements, we have an enforcement program that can issue violations, civil penalties, orders that will modify or revoke their license if necessary. So we have a very robust enforcement program. And like I say, we inspect these facilities on a periodicity that aligns with the potential danger that might befall a member of the public if they were to be exposed. So, and our inspection program is quite robust. I'm a former inspector myself. It's about a year program that has formal classes that have to be taken and passed successfully. There's a many on-the-job type accompaniments where you are under instruction as you perform these inspection activities. And then finally, you're qualified as an inspector through an oral board. So it's a rigorous program, and only inspectors can perform these sort of reviews of licensees.
Did you say the regulation had been updated recently?
Yes.
Give us just a flavor for how it was changed.
What we did was I had mentioned in the 2005 time frame, we had done an assessment and since 9/11 and looked at what things we needed to make regulatory requirements. And what we typically do is we will issue orders that modifies their license and has them perform certain activities. We'll then take a little bit longer and go through the rulemaking process, which is a 2 to 3 year process, involves outreach to stakeholders and members of the public to help us in that rulemaking endeavor. And so that process took place, and we issued that regulation in March of this year. It involves, as you've heard, a background check to ensure that individuals that are allowed to have access by themselves, that they're trustworthy and reliable. The licensee performs that review and makes the determination as to whether the individual meets the trustworthy and reliable. We also have issued which my colleague here had indicated, we issued a guidance document of best practices for performing these type of reviews, so that the individual that's responsible for making that call has guidance on what to look for and what things to. The other thing that it requires is liaisoning with local law enforcement, so that you have a plan that if in the course of the required detecting and assessing and responding to the potential theft of a source, you have to lay out a plan with local law enforcement so that they can respond. They're required to inform the NRC. They call the local law enforcement first, and they're required to call us as soon as they're done with that. So we get early notification so that we can outreach to our federal partners, make sure that this lost or stolen source has actually been absconded with. And
Okay.
Those are some of the things.
Can you give us some idea how often these reports to the police and to the NRC come in for devices that are missing or believed to be stolen?
I would say several a month, and the vast majority of those, all but in the last since 2005. I'm sorry, 2010, 11, 12, and 13. There has been no Category 1 source lost or stolen. For Category 2 sources...
Give us some idea what a Category 1 as opposed to a Category 2 is, please.
Yes. The IAEA standards and their code of conduct identifies Category 1 sources as, if not safely managed or securely protected, would likely to cause permanent injury to a person who handled them or were otherwise in contact with them for more than a few minutes. It would probably be fatal to be close to this amount of unshielded material for a period of a few minutes to an hour. That's the most, and these sources are used in irradiators, and they're very strong sources. They tend to be Cobalt 60. And Category 2 is one step down from that, where if you were in close contact to it for an hour or two, there would be serious injury and possibly a fatality.
I would assume that for Category 1 devices, that the level of risk would be higher.
Yes.
The requirement for securing the device would be greater, and maybe even inspections would occur more often. Give us some idea how often inspections would occur for the different categories.
Annually for for Category 1 sources.
And for the other categories?
It varies. Some are periodicity of every 2 years or every 3 years, depending upon the strength of the material and its potential to harm members of the public. And I will say also for Category 1 sources, our Part 37, the new rule, requires that that anytime the source is removed from its storage container, it sets off an alarm. So it's a new requirement that was in Part 37.
And is that for Category 1 devices?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just ask our panelists, would you just comment on the rule that Captain Stories just described? What do you feel, what should we be encouraged by, maybe concerned about? Please, any of you. David?
Well, as we note in our report, our site visits were assessing the current rules. Part 37 didn't kick in for NRC-led states till this year, and it won't roll out for states until 2016. What I would highlight, however, is many of the problems were identified in our report I don't believe would be addressed. For example, the issue of co-location, where some sites are able to not be subject to the security requirements because they're separately stored. Therefore, they're not totaled up to hit the regulatory threshold that triggers the requirements for enhanced security. Do not believe that's addressed. Some of the specificity that we've talked about in terms of types of locks for Category 2 sources, I don't believe is addressed. And then the issue about trustworthiness and reliability certifications and the process by which that is done, I do not believe is addressed. So the decision is still being left to the licensee, and there's no process or criteria that would disqualify someone from being given such a certification. There's no process by which, say, for example, say you had a conviction or a red flag that would trigger a greater NRC involvement.
Ms. Harrington, Dr. Gawadia, would you just react to what Mr. Trimble just said?
I'd like to take perhaps one of his points, just very briefly, actually one of Mr. Sartorius' points, which is the coordination. And I think this is one of those places where we can play a special role and do, along with NRC and DHS. Reaching out to law enforcement can often be very complicated. There are many different layers. You might be in a tribal area. It might be a university campus with its own security police. It could be an environment where you have local, county, and state police. So part of what we do collaboratively to go a bit above and beyond what is in the actual rule is to organize tabletop exercises that involve all elements of the community. These exercises really help bring together the different elements of the community that would be involved in response to any kind of incident. And so far, in collaboration with our colleagues at the Department of Energy who do counterterrorism and counterproliferation, we've run well over 100 of these exercises all over the United States in communities.
How often? Like in a year or what?
Several a year usually. But we have found that the feedback from this kind of exercise is extremely positive. But if you